Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating theological investigation. It's a story about a prophecy, what looked like a total failure, and a pretty surprising reinterpretation that followed. Okay, so let's dive right in. It all kicked off with this incredibly specific prophecy from a man named Joshua McClinella. He went public saying he'd received a direct message. Christ would return for the church, not just soon, but on the Feast of Trumpets, specifically September 23rd to 24th, 2025. Now, what's wild is this wasn't just some fringe idea from one guy. No, this thing went viral. We're talking thousands of people all around the world coming forward to say they'd had dreams and visions that all pointed to this exact same date. So you can imagine, right? The stage was set for this huge, globally anticipated event. The date was circled on calendars everywhere. Belief was running high. And the big question hanging in the air was, what's going to happen? The answer? Absolutely nothing. The dates came, and they went. The world just kept on spinning as usual. It looked like the prophecy was a total bust. But, and this is where the story gets really interesting, for many of the believers, this was far from over. Instead of just giving up on it, a totally new and unexpected theory popped up that completely changed the conversation. The new claim, and McLachlan himself was behind it, was this. The prophecy wasn't wrong, the calendar was. The divine message was right, they said. They read the wrong calendar. So here's the core of their new argument. They claimed that the date, September 23rd and 24th, wasn't for our modern calendar at all. No, they said it was for the Julian calendar, the one the Romans used way back when. Now, you gotta understand, they weren't saying, oops, we were wrong. Not at all. They framed it as a clarification. And when you do the math and convert that Julian date to our Gregorian calendar, you land on October 7th and 8th. So just like that, hope was back on the table, just delayed a couple of weeks. Okay, so this new calendar theory, as you can imagine, didn't just slide by without notice. It caught the attention of an author named Nguyen Timothy, who decided to do a deep dive to see if any of this actually checked out, biblically or historically. And he started with a really basic but absolutely crucial question. Does it make any sense at all to time a sacred Hebrew feast using a Roman civil calendar? Is there any precedent for that anywhere? Well, his investigation pretty much immediately hit some major roadblocks. First off, biblical feasts like the Feast of Trumpets, they always follow the Hebrew calendar. That was the one God established. And second, if you look at the historical record, Jesus and his followers, they use the Hebrew calendar for sacred stuff too. The Julian calendar was for taxes and Roman business, not holy days. And, well, the math just doesn't work. Look at this. The Feast of Trumpets is Tishrei 1-2 on the Hebrew calendar. On our calendar, that's September 23-24. So that new October date, it just doesn't line up with the Feast of Trumpets, no matter which calendar you're looking at. But the rabbit hole goes even deeper. The investigation then turned to a linguistic debate, a debate over a single word that some people were using to justify a date change. And it turns out this wasn't a brand new argument. Yeah, the whole thing came down to this one Hebrew word from the book of Psalms, kisseh. The root of the word literally means to cover, to conceal, or to hide. So here are the two sides. Some people translate keseh as full moon, thinking, the moon is fully covered in light. That would put the feast in the middle of the month. But Timothy says, nope, that's a misreading. He argues the real meaning points to concealment, the new moon, when it's hidden and the sky is covered in darkness. And this is a huge deal, because the Feast of Trumpets has always been a new moon festival, right at the start of the month. So this linguistic deep dive, it basically confirms the original September date was the right one all along, not some later full moon date in October. Okay, so let's recap. The Julian calendar idea? Debunked. The linguistic argument for a full moon date? Debunked. The reasoning for moving the prophecy to October just falls apart. But, and this is where the whole analysis takes a completely unexpected turn. So the author started thinking, okay, the logic they used to get to October 7th and 8th was all wrong. But does that mean the date itself is totally meaningless? And the answer was, wow, not at all. It turns out that October 7th and 8th, while definitely not the Feast of Trumpets, just so happens to land perfectly on day one of the Feast of Tabernacles, another huge, major biblical feast. I mean, what are the odds? This coincidence completely changed the author's whole perspective on the situation. It stopped being about just proving a prophecy wrong and became something much deeper, a lesson about divine timing and how we try to understand it. So, when you put it all together, here's the takeaway. The logic for the October date was bad, for sure, but it accidentally pointed to another super significant time on the calendar. This led the author to a bigger idea. Maybe Christ's return could be connected to any of the sacred feasts. The real point isn't about circling a date, it's about being ready, period. So, if you look at it this way, the whole event wasn't really a failed prophecy at all. You could almost see it as this weird roundabout catalyst for spiritual renewal. Maybe the point was never about getting the date right, but about getting your heart right and reminding a whole lot of people to be prepared no matter what day it is. And really, this verse just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly sums up where the author's investigation landed. The real message wasn't hidden in a specific prophecy, but in this timeless biblical command to always be ready, precisely because you don't know the hour. And that leaves us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? When a prophecy is challenged, what happens to faith? Does it just break? Or, as we saw here, does it find a way to pivot and reinterpret, to find a deeper, more enduring meaning in it all?